All right, all right, all right. Hello, 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 everybody. This is Mongo's Big Thanks. Glad you could join us today. I am here with Gfan84, better known as TJ, and we're going to be
Hello.
talking about a variety of things.
Yes, we are. And we're mainly going to be talking about like our favorite subject, which is giant monsters, Godzilla, King Kong, and we're going to dive into some of the backstory and like how Mongo and I have become huge Godzilla fans. So Mongo, what was your favorite? What was your first Godzilla movie? What was your first exposure to that?
Oh man, now that's a great question, and I think this is something that a lot of people, at least from my point of view, a lot of people kind of have a similar kind of story with getting into Godzilla. I know for
Mm-hmm.
me, I was a big, huge fan of dinosaurs as a kid. I still love them,
Yeah.
big,
Yep.
huge fan. Basically, when I was a kid growing up, my uncle Jimbo, they lived pretty close, and he would be at my house a lot of the time. So basically, we'd be watching pretty much anything, whether it was old kung fu movies or
Mm-hmm.
dinosaur movies like the Valley of Guanji. But
Oh,
pretty
that's
much,
classic.
like one of the ones that I remember a lot was there were probably two movies that we watched a lot growing up, and that
Mm-hmm.
was Godzilla versus the Sea Monster and
Mm-hmm.
Godzilla versus Megalon.
Ah, yes. So, yes, and those are movies that most people.
What was that? You cut out a bit. TJ, you still there?
One, 1 second.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you.
All right. So, like I was saying, the one movie that I started out with was Godzilla 1985. I was about
Mm.
3 years old, and I just remember seeing my dad brought it home. He would always bring home horror movies and stuff I couldn't watch. I was about three, so it's stuff I couldn't watch, and I was scared to watch. So he decided to bring home a Godzilla movie, and I still remember the very first scene where Godzilla like fully appears. Yeah, that security guard. He's walking outside the nuclear plant, and the ground opens up, and you just
What was that? You kind of cut out again there.
huh. uh yeah, not sure why I'm cutting out here, but trying to fix that. 1 second.
Alrighty, folks. So I'm just gonna put this out on Twitter. We are live. Come on down.
All right, can you hear me better?
Yep, I hear you.
Okay, good. No, like I was saying, one of the things that I really liked about the Godzilla movies was the very first thing that I saw was the camera panning up, you see a full shot of Godzilla, and you hear his roar, and I was just hooked. Here was this giant dinosaur mutated by radiation, and he's just completely indestructible, and it was just awesome. It was just amazing to see.
Yeah, that's great. Now I got to ask you. The other day, just kind of in preparation for this, I was watching the original 1954 Gojira,
Uh-huh.
subtitled, and I was listening to the one of the commentaries they had on there. Really nice. Uh, the individuals that were on the commentary, they were talking about Godzilla and how some people initially may have thought that he was kind of more like a dragon like inspiration, but
Right.
and then they kind of explained and talked about that a bit here and there. But honestly, for me, I saw Godzilla, and obviously he doesn't have the traditional qualities, I guess,
Yeah, the
that
dragon.
you would say a usual Western dragon, or even the Eastern dragon has.
Yeah.
But I pretty much, like they were saying, like in that actual movie. You know,
Right.
it's a holdover from the Jurassic or the Cretaceous
Yeah.
period that was
Hmm.
reawoken. And I
Yes.
really loved that part of it too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I was like,
Um, yeah, it's kind of funny because a lot of people do have the mistake of thinking that he's more of a dragon, but even the creators really never thought that. From what I could gather from the information that I have a lot of books and stuff like that, and pertaining to Godzilla, and I'm pretty sure I know the commentators you're talking about. It's Ed Godzilla and Steve Rifle, if I remember right.
mm,
Um, yeah, those two are like the gurus when it comes to like the backstory of all the Godzilla movies and stuff like that. And it is interesting. I always saw him as like a reawakened dinosaur just mutated by radiation, and that's what made him so big and aggressive, and also can spit radioactive fire. It's really cool. Now, if you want to look at like more traditional dragons, that would be like Manda or even
hmm
King Ghidorah. King Ghidorah's heads look more like the traditional Eastern dragon. And you can tell that was more based on Orochi, which was the eight-headed dragon from uh, Japanese mythology. So,
Oh, definitely. Recently, earlier this week, I was watching the movie Atragon for the first time.
mhm.
That was
Yeah,
a very fun movie, very
yeah,
entertaining.
that one's hard to get too. So,
Yeah,
yeah, that
I got pretty lucky, I guess. I don't know, but
yeah.
that was, just kind of, when you're going through movies, it's nice to find something new to kind
Mhm.
of intermingle, intermix
Yeah,
with
yeah,
your
exactly.
usual diet.
And one of the things too, like that I always found interesting is when it comes to like you have your modern like um the Avengers and that sort of thing, the comic book movies and the Marvel verse, and it's funny how they like had all these individual movies, and then they did the crossover with the original first Avengers, and then they kept going from there. And when you really look, yeah, that's also in the comics. But one of the first movie franchises, two of the first movie franchises to do that were Universal and the Godzilla series. Because they actually took monsters from uh, that had solo movies, and then they merged them all together into the Godzilla franchise. And so it's kind of funny. It's for I can see why like the Avengers was like so hyped up, and because it was first time for comic books it was done on the big screen. But for other moviegoers, they kind of understood. It's like, yeah, Universal did it, and then Toho did it, and I'm talking about what Universal. You go back to you know Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. That's a classic. I love that one.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and you know yeah. Then you had obviously the original King Kong versus Godzilla from Toho, and that's one of the subjects I wanted to bring up. So, how much do you know about the background to that movie?
Oh, I'm mostly aware of just some of the, mostly just some of the rumors, some of the hearsay here and there that,
Mhm.
and some of the elements that kind of were peculiar, like in the movie, Kong is said to gain strength from electricity,
Right,
not
right.
exactly characteristic of giant apes, not
Yeah,
really
exactly.
something you would say,
Well,
see, or understand,
actually, there's a reason for that, and
hmm
I'm going to explain it to you and to the audience here. So, back in the day, this is back in the late 50s, early 60s. Willis O'Brien, the creator of Kong and the special effects, was really down on his luck. And Mighty Joe Young, which he made, did terrible at the box office. So he's looking for one last run to have King Kong in. He did King Kong, he did Son of Kong, then he did Mighty Joe Young, but he wanted one last movie to have Kong be the star. So he's talking to the Hollywood producers. He's trying to get this movie, off the ground, and he runs into a producer named John Beck. John Beck decides to buy the rights to the story, which his original story was King Kong versus Frankenstein. The Frankenstein monster would be created by a combination of other animals, and this is why he would be Kong's size. So, what ends up happening is John Beck, however, kind of screws over Willis O'Brien. Well, you know what? He actually did. He screwed over Willis O'Brien. He took the rights and he went straight to Japan, to Toho. And he sold Toho the rights to the story idea of King Kong versus Frankenstein. Well, when he did that, Toho immediately ditched Frankenstein and put in Godzilla. Because of this, change, when Willis O'Brien found this out, he was heartbroken over it. And he died soon after, pretty much poor and, heartbroken over it. His constituents, such as like Ray Harryhausen, then publicly denounced like the Godzilla series and really felt that it was, subpar. The Japanese have no money, blah 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 blah. And it was more animosity it was misguided animosity because, again, John Beck was the one who actually went and took the rights and sold it to Toho. E.G. Tsuburaya, the special effects director for the Godzilla series up until, Destroy All Monsters, he really had no idea about the background about what happened. And he even wanted to try to do stop motion for the original Godzilla and even for Godzilla, King Kong versus Godzilla, but he just didn't have the time or the money to do so. So it's kind of interesting how, because of this, many special effects, wizards in Hollywood up until even like the 90s, really didn't like having a Godzilla movie. Godzilla movies, because they felt this is what put an end to Willis O'Brien's career and pretty much left him in the poorhouse. But it's more misguided. It was really John Beck who instrumented this. It wasn't Toho being malicious or any of that stuff. They just bought the story and added in Godzilla. So one of the things that Toho did too was as you said, it's kind of odd that King Kong gains strength from electricity. Well, they swapped out Kong's power for Frankenstein because Frankenstein, how is he awakened? Electricity. So they gave Kong the power of electricity, also to be a bit more of a match to Godzilla, who can literally breathe fire. So if it was just regular Kong, he would not be able to withstand that. So they had to increase the marquee value a bit more with that. And so what ends up happening is because of the kind of intrigue that happened behind the scenes. I don't know if you know this or not, but back in the back as early as the 80s, or late 70s and early 80s, American producers at one point wanted to make their own Godzilla movie, but because of the stigma with many of the special effects people, many of them refused to work on it, and so it never got off the ground other than through concept. Yeah. So, and really up until really the 90s, when they were really looking into making trying to make a Godzilla movie, that was really just the casualty of the fact that Willis O'Brien had that situation happen to him. And again, it's understandable, the anguish, but it was kind of misguided toward Godzilla, because also when with King Kong versus Godzilla, this is the movie that propelled Godzilla to stardom, like completely. Like it was one of the biggest box office successes that Toho had for a Godzilla movie around the world. So this was like an instant, moment for Godzilla, and from then on, as you know, they kept making Godzilla movies, and Kong kind of fell by the wayside. I mean, you still had that remake of Kong back in the 70s, then you had King Kong Lives, then you also had Toho's own King Kong Escapes. But really, that's really all the movies you really got to see of Kong, and Godzilla movies just kept, being cranked out. So.
Yeah, that is very, very interesting stuff. A quick shout out here to here. Let me show the comment here. Fan scene vids, really great guy on YouTube and Twitter.
Oh, hey,
Cool dude. Yeah.
yeah, cool, cool.
Glad you can come on here. Glad you
Yeah,
can come and
yeah,
watch. You know.
yeah. I mean, we're just a bunch of talking icons right now, but
Yeah.
but that's more to save. I'm actually using my phone, and like, I don't have a good camera setup on my computer, and my computer's still like, I think my computer crapped the bed. So it other than just running regular programs, it is not. I can't stream anything on it. It's just not working. So probably going to have to get another computer.
Oof, that's rough. But
Yeah,
how about this question here we got here from Fanscene Vids? Is Shin Godzilla any good? I've been wanting to watch it. What would
I
you say?
yeah, I liked it. I did enjoy it. This Shin Godzilla is a bit different than every other Godzilla movie. More so because it's one of the few movies that Japan made that it actually pokes fun at the Japanese government. It's more a political satire than it is a Godzilla movie, but I thought it was very well done. That's just me. How
I
did
would
you like
definitely agree. Definitely agree here. Me personally, I really enjoyed. I have I have a fun little story about Shin Godzilla.
it?
Back when it was released, I think that was around 2016.
Yes.
Later on that year, they had a select showings of that throughout the U.S. at select theaters,
Yep.
and
I went to
I
one.
just so happened to be able to see it about. I think it was probably the weekend of my birthday during October, and boy, was that amazing! Just being able to see a Godzilla movie on the big screen in a
Oh
theater.
yeah, yeah. Yes,
But yeah,
that's
just
my sentiment
great
exactly.
movie.
Yeah, yeah. It's very much it's very much pokes fun at the Japanese government. It's one of the few political satires that actually got through a lot of the censors in Japan, and it's mainly in response to what happened with the Fukushima
Mm,
nuclear
mhm.
disaster. That's what this movie really represents, and it's more of the what it represents is the government's inability to deal with a crisis because um, one of the things you'll find hilarious, and I'm not going to really give any spoilers, but they have meeting after meeting after meeting, and it's no joke. That's truly how it is.
Oh yes, that's honestly, that is one of the stronger things that you initially notice upon your first viewing. What I love, another element that I love in that, which is kind of something that I love about just giant monsters in general, is just
Uh-huh.
how the sheer scale. And I guess that's something that a lot of people enjoy about giant
Mm-hmm.
monsters. They're gigantic, but they
Yeah.
also show, especially in this movie, Shin Godzilla, they show how minuscule, one
Mm-hmm.
person and even a government, a society of people is when
Oh yeah.
faced with such a titanic kind of threat, And really, as that kind of goes along, especially, throughout most, great
Uh-huh.
giant monster movies is just how society is able to cope with such
Yeah.
gigantic forces of natural or unnatural destruction, and it's
Yes.
really on
Exactly.
display in Shin Godzilla.
Yes. It very much so is. Number one, if you like that kind of theme, GMK is a really good one. Just showing the scale of Godzilla and the other monsters because it's I like the little details that they start using, especially in the newer Godzilla movies. The fact that when they just take a footstep, I mean, they cause so much destruction just walking where they're walking at, and it's one of the things that I know. Well, you have to understand the Godzilla movies also became a lot more juvenile
Oh
as
yeah.
they progressed. And it's more a reflection of the culture in Japan. After the war, they were rebounding very nicely. So they could have like all the nicer things. Children became a big priority. So they didn't want to make everything gloom, doom, and despair anymore. So they made Godzilla more into a superhero, essentially. And so they shied away from like showing like the actual destruction and the aftermath. But then you started to see resurgence of that, like with Godzilla 1985 and then the Heisei series. And then you had like GMK and now Shin Godzilla. And I think Shin Godzilla is probably one of the better representations if in a real world situation, here's what would happen. That's how I see it. See Shin Godzilla. If Godzilla showed up in the real world, this is what would happen.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so yeah, I like those movies. Now, we were also talking about like a little bit other than Godzilla. We were talking about our love for like just corny, unapologetic like B movies, and we were talking about like movies from Asylum Pictures. If you guys don't know who they are, they're the ones who make the crazy movies like Atlantic Rim and like Sharktopus and stuff like that. And we were just talking about those, and those movies are just great. I mean, I was actually very saddened when Roger Corman passed away. He was like the king of B movies. I mean, he's the one who prided himself on making like these like exploitative monster movies and stuff like that. And one of the things that I loved about Roger Corman too was he was a very good sport about it. He often prided himself on the fact that many bigwigs in Hollywood got their start working with him. James Cameron was a second director on his movie Galaxy of Terror. That's how James Cameron started out. Bill Paxton was a set designer on that movie too. It's like he loved that fact. He loved the fact that like they got these big Hollywood stars got their start with him. So he's a really good sport about it.
That is great. I love learning about all these interesting things, the intricacies, I guess, of just the film industry in general, and as it relates to these movies as well.
Yeah, exactly. And like look how many actors and actresses have one of their earlier movies were usually like horror movies. What, Kevin Bacon and Friday the 13th? Who else? There are a bunch of people, that got their start doing like, just B style horror movies and stuff like that, or movies with practically no budget.
Oh, I really enjoyed TJ. He was telling me about Emilia Clarke, and obviously very well known for being Daenerys Targaryen. And she herself was also in one of these wonderful, unique movies.
Yeah, it's called Jurassic Attack. Triassic Attack or something. I can't remember. It's pretty much the bones of dinosaurs come to life. That's literally the plot of the movie. Yeah.
And I was just blown away because I remember being in high school when that movie came out. Let me share a screen here. Let me see. Yeah. Share screen, Chrome tab, and Triassic Attack. And obviously, folks, it's just incredible. Yeah. Like, here's a poster, and there she is. There's our queen.
Yes.
what an interesting. It's one of those ideas and concepts where it's just like, wow.
Yeah, but it's just kind of fun. Well, did you know that George Takei from Star Trek, one of his first roles was doing the dubbing for like Rodan?
Wow!
That was one of his first gigs. Yep, he did the dubbing for Rodan. And you can hear his voice in the dubbed version of Rodan. If you listen closely, he does a couple different characters. But if you listen closely, you can recognize his voice.
Oh, that is amazing.
Famous for Star Trek, and yet one of his first roles was dubbing movies for Godzilla movies and stuff like that. And he had an interview one time, and he said when they first were doing the dubbing process, they had to try to make the words match the lips as best they could. Well, in Godzilla Raids Again, there was a scene where essentially Koizumi's character called his girlfriend an idiot, which is Bakano in Japanese. So they couldn't find the word to match the lips. So when somebody made the suggestion of saying, "Oh, just say banana oil," and they actually say banana oil in the movie, and it's kind of like a slang slash slapper term back in the Great Depression. So, like,
Wow.
so even like back then, it was like a very old term just saying banana oil, and it's and he said that and during the interview he also said, when it came to screaming and stuff like that, you just gave it your all. You just went full into it. It's like it's like ridiculous when you see a guy in a studio just start screaming like they're all panicked, but he said you just gave it your all. And so yeah, he it's one of those funny things. It's like he's most known. George Takei is most known for Star Trek, but for many of the Godzilla fans, he's known as one of the dubbing voices for some of the early monster films.
Just wow.
Yeah. So it's funny how it's all connected. It's like, oh, this guy worked on this, but he also worked on this. When it came to the model work for the original Star Wars, George Lucas was inspired by Eiji Tsuburai's model work for the Godzilla movies. So
that is great. That is just wow. Great stuff, and of course, just kind of listening into like the commentary of the original 1954, you see, and just watching it in general, you see similarities between that movie and some of its contemporaries, like the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Just as an obvious example, a large lizard is reawoken, comes to the modern world, chaos ensues, and humanity tries to figure something out,
Well, one of the unique things, though, that I have pointed out with the original Godzilla movie compared to the other giant monster movies from America is its moral story. For instance, you look at any of the giant monster movies from like the 50s and from America. What happens? The monster gets loose. When the monster is in its natural environment, we are at the mercy of its, rage. But when it comes to civilization, man's collective intelligence is able to defeat the monster. The reason being is it's kind of like a symbolism of America taming the Wild West. Civilization is what brought about the taming of like the Wild West, the animals, and that sort of thing. That's kind of the symbolism that you see in American monster movies. Godzilla, however, the original Gojira, is the complete opposite. What happens? Godzilla destroys civilization. I mean, there's nothing that can stop him. So what they have to do is they actually go into his territory and literally catch him while he's sleeping and kill him while he's sleeping. Almost like having to use not necessarily brute force, but your intelligence to defeat the monster. So it's like the opposite. It's the polar opposite of the way the Godzilla movies were showing compared to what the American movies were showing, kind of thing.
Oh, definitely. The contrast just in the final moments of the original Gojira movie, just the peacefulness, the somberness of just Dr. Serizawa going down into the depths of the ocean and finding basically, just a peaceful Godzilla just chilling out at the bottom of the sea. And then just, it's very, very stark contrast to what, as you're saying, we've been seeing in a lot of its contemporaries, basically. Like looking, a thought that came to mind was the movie 20 Million Miles to Earth.
Yeah.
Very, very lovely movie. Great movie back in 1957.
Yeah.
Essentially, you have a alien monster that comes to Earth. Its entire existence on Earth is essentially pain and going from one bit to another bit of just being attacked by dogs or by people or by the military, and it's a very
Yeah.
violent, well, not
Yeah.
violent, but in
Yeah.
the traditional sense, but
Hmm.
it's a very sad existence for this thing.
Yeah.
And in a way, it is similar. It's things to compare and contrast. Not to say that one movie is altogether better than another,
Oh,
but
exactly.
saying that, seeing what you like and seeing how they compare, I guess, with others.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too. Like the ending for Godzilla, the original Gojira, it's very somber. It's actually quite a downer. It's like it's almost
Mhm.
like hopelessness because you feel bad for Serizawa. He sacrificed himself to save humanity, but you feel bad for Godzilla because you realize that he is just doing what he instinctively does, and he was burned by essentially what they said is when they were making the suit, they wanted to show his skin being almost like burned like from radiation, so it sounds like he was in pain his whole entire life. And so it's really a sharp contrast to like how many American movies, like when the beast is destroyed, there's a big celebration and that kind of thing. They
Mhm.
kind of made it a lot more somber and a lot more almost like a downer, you know.
There were a few movies that had somewhat similar somber endings. The original Rodan,
Yeah,
that was a very
exactly.
sad ending.
Yeah.
Godzilla, 1984, The Return of Godzilla.
Yeah, that one. Yeah,
That,
that was a
oof,
big one.
gosh, yeah, it was sad.
Yeah, that's probably one of the saddest Godzilla moments out there, apart from
Mhm.
him dying, like in
Oh yeah.
Godzilla vs. Destroyer. But um, yeah, it's so interesting when you look at like um the tone of the different movies and like what their kind of meaning is. Um, you like I said, Godzilla is a monster for all seasons. There's fun Godzilla movies. There's Godzilla movies where it's almost like a crime drama. You have some that are politically charged. You have other movies that it's like a science fiction spectacle. You have space opera. I mean, almost every type of science fiction kind of thing you can go through, it's gone through. You have time travel in some of them. It's like they've literally like it's like they have a big checklist. It's like, has Godzilla done this, 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 and this? It's literally like a big checklist, And you have great movies that are more action set piece. You have other movies that are more drama. I mean, I argue that like when you got into like the some of the '60s Godzilla movies, like um, Godzilla versus the Sea Monster or Godzilla versus um, Mega Godzilla, they almost have a James Bond kind of feel to it with the music and with the overall cinematography. You kind of get that feeling there of like they got inspiration from like the James Bond movies and that type of thing.
That's very very cool. It's really interesting. I love the comparison here, and even the
Mhm.
similarities too. When you mentioned James Bond, that
Yeah.
is also another series that incredibly long run. Just
Oh yes. Yeah.
hundreds of movies. Not hundreds, but heaps of
Yeah.
movies. A movie for every flavor, pretty much.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I always thought it's kind of funny because I remember when I watched some of the older James Bond movies with Sean Connery, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I didn't realize they could get away with all this stuff in the '60s. And then I was thinking to myself, oh wait, it was the '60s. Never mind. Because there were some things where it's like because my grandparents always were saying like, oh yeah, it was a lot more conservative and stuff like that back in our day. And then I'm like watching some of the movies, I'm like, this doesn't seem conservative at all. This actually seems pretty flirtatious. And it's like, okay, you know, Yeah. but but yeah, like it's kind of funny because um they when it comes to the Godzilla movies, when it comes to the giant monster movies in general, one of the things that what I like about it is these movies, some movies they do have serious tone. Then there's other movies, yeah, it's lighthearted and it's fun. But I kind of like that kind of thing with the Godzilla series because no Godzilla movie is exactly alike, and everyone thinks, well, you have so many, and you can always tell the story so many times. But when you really look at it, the tone of the movie, the direction that it takes, the cinematography, each one's kind of different.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I love this comment here highlighted on screen from our friend Fanzine Vids. Might have to binge some Godzilla movies soon. Kind of in relation to that, do you have any recommendations that you would give him, TJ?
Oh yeah. Okay. So one of the things that I would recommend, start with the first Godzilla movie, where it be the original Gojira or Godzilla King of the Monsters. Another one that would be great is Godzilla versus the Thing / Mothra versus Godzilla. Another one would be Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. I then would probably try to go more into like Destroy All Monsters, then go into Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. I'm not saying I'm not saying skip all of them, but one of the things that I'm highlighting kind of like the bigger movies that happened. Then you have Godzilla vs. Megalon. Then you have Godzilla 1985 or 1984 version. Then you have like the Heisei series. You have Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, and Godzilla versus Destroya. And then you have obviously Godzilla 1998. And then you have the Millennium series, which is Godzilla 2000. You have GMK, and then you have like the legendary Godzilla, of course, and then you have Shin Godzilla, and then the Godzilla anime on Netflix. So really, watch it however you want. I'm just giving recommendations on which ones, but it's kind of hard to really. It's kind of hard. It depends what you're in the mood for. Are you in the mood for a dark and disturbing kind of Godzilla? Are you in the mood for like a politically charged Godzilla movie? It's really up to you, the order and which ones you want to watch. Because the fun, it's kind of funny. So I Mongo and I, we both know many people in the fandom menace. We know many people who are huge Star Wars fans. And when it comes, and what Disney's doing to the lore, of course, is changing the lore. They're changing what was once known as canon to be not canon anymore, and it's driving many Star Wars fans nuts, and I don't blame them. But as a Godzilla fan, you have to understand that Godzilla reinvents itself like every couple of years. So like our lore is all over the place. The Godzilla lore is literally all over the place. So there is no real way to track this down. So we're just used to it. Like whenever it's like a fresh coat of paint every couple of years. That's what happens with Godzilla. It's like, okay, paint over this one.
Yeah, even just looking at the suits, an example would be just looking at the suits in just that first Godzilla series, often called the Showa series. After 1954 and the some of its sequels, the suit gets updated occasionally, and if you're really, a lot of at least something I noticed, a lot of really in-depth fans, they are able to identify, the differences in each Godzilla suit, and it's amazing. It amazes me how people are able to, identify these suits. They're able to say, okay, this is Bio Goji. This is the King Goji suit, and it's really great. And especially like with the first kind of series of Godzilla movies, it took place in the mid 50s to late 60s. Those, besides probably the first 1954 Godzilla movie, you can really kind of jump back and forth between those movies, and you're pretty much going to be fine. As you kind of move along, with the ones that came out in the late 80s and the mid to late 90s, you kind of see there's a lot more connection between the movies here and there.
Yes.
And then, of course, with the Millennium era, starting, back in, the early 2000s, there's there were some things that really tripped me up, kind of growing
Oh
up,
yeah.
and
Well,
you know.
see, the Millennium Era is kind of unique because you have to understand Godzilla '98, which was the American Godzilla movie. They originally had a 3-movie deal, and Toho was not going to make any more until that 3-movie deal happened. But because of the backlash, and because not just fans but general audience, they saw that not the '98 Godzilla wasn't the Godzilla they remember. Um, okay, I'll put it to you this way: if there's any Star Wars fans, Godzilla '98 is to Godzilla fans as Last Jedi is to Star Wars fans. I'll put it to you that way. I'm putting that mildly,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
because of that, Toho very quickly started to make Godzilla movies again to show, no, this is the real Godzilla. But in doing so, they didn't plan it out like they did like the Heisei series. So that's why they let so many different directors here. Here, you come in, you try your, you try your way. Then they had other director, the director for GMK, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Attack. He's the director from the Gamera trilogy that was very well received back in the '90s, and so that's why they grabbed him. But his movie was completely different from the rest of the Millennium series because he wanted to do it his way. And what's kind of funny about that was he loved the fact that he got to work on a Godzilla movie, and that was his dream come true. But unfortunately, unlike Daiei, where he did the Gamera trilogy, Toho had a lot more restrictions on him. Like they wanted the movie out within a year, and like he didn't have that much time to plan special effects and stuff like that because he wanted to make it as grand as he could, like the Gamera trilogy, but he just didn't have the time to do so. And that's why GMK, it still turned out really well, but GMK was literally like by itself. Even though it's part of the Millennium series, it's literally a movie by itself.
Yes. And again, just a real brief that we mentioned the Gamera series, the Gamera trilogy. Those movies are also very great. Really, again, I can't like as a resource, I guess. Wikipedia is kind of iffy here and there, but I really enjoy going on to Wikizilla, kind of taking a little read. You don't have to do a whole reading dissertation. You don't have to study a huge thing, and for the most part, pretty much reading a page or two from Wikizilla just on some of these subjects can really illuminate and really straighten out a lot of questions you might have.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I always kind of joke about this because when somebody asks me, what is Godzilla, and I'm like, well, it's actually a layered answer because it depends which one you're talking about. Are you talking about the Showa series? Are you talking about the Heisei series? Are you talking about the Millennium series? Are you talking about Hanna-Barbera? Are you talking about Marvel? And a lot of people don't know this. Marvel Comics actually had the rights to Godzilla, and Godzilla actually fought the Avengers, and he fought the Fantastic Four. No joke, he actually did fight them. And it's like, there's so many different iterations of Godzilla, it's not even funny now. You have the anime series now, and then you have Godzilla '98. You have then Godzilla '98 the series, which was the animated series, which actually was very good. The animated series for Godzilla '98 was actually very good, and it was actually like the classic Godzilla movies. It literally played out like the classic Godzilla movies, even with the complete Destroy All Monsters type homage. And so it's almost like the creators for that show really seem to have more appreciation for the Godzilla series than Dean Denver and Ron Elmrich. So,
and I gotta tell you, growing up as a kid, for me, it was my experience with giant monsters and giant monster media was pretty much limited to whatever Godzilla movies were showing on TV.
Exactly.
A few dinosaur movies here and there.
Yep.
But
same here.
I gotta tell you, like now, as an adult, it's great being an adult. How fun it is. And it's a mix, but of course, it is really amazing just being able to go and find all of these different things. I recently was talking with my uncle, and he actually had a DVD for part of season 1 of Ultraman. And that was a very fun is only 8 episodes on a disc, but it was very fun watching those 8 episodes that were on there.
Oh yeah,
And just being able to look through all these different, you know, iterations of giant monsters. It's just,
oh yeah,
it's amazing.
yeah. And you know, it's kind of funny because I'm the same way. I was born in 1984, and so like it was whatever was on TV, and one of the things that was on TV a lot were the Godzilla movies, because at the time they were cheap to purchase for TV. And so do you remember Grandpa from the Munsters? He would host on TBS Super Scary Saturday. Do you remember? Did you get that channel?
I do not. I don't know if I've ever. I don't think I've seen that,
Okay,
but
yeah.
I may have. But it's
During the
been a
late '80s,
while.
early '90s, he hosted Super Scary Saturday, which wasn't even scary movies. It was just the old classic monster movies and stuff like that. But like he did a lot of the Godzilla movies, and it was just fun. Little quirks he did for the monster movies. But that's how you caught most of the monster movies on TV. You just flip through the channels like the old days. I call it the old days because we actually had a TV guide we had to read from.
Yes, the
Um,
TV guide.
yeah,
Yes.
with the TV guide, and it's kind of funny because I tried to explain this to some younger people, and I'm like, you don't understand. You know how it has a little box now? It tells you what's going to be on. We didn't have that. We had to actually flip. We had this booklet that everybody got, and it would just say what was going to be on for the week. That's it.
Oh man.
And I would regularly look for Godzilla movies and Godzilla marathons and stuff like that. And I remember when they announced the Sci-Fi Channel. Do you? I
Oh.
don't know how old you are.
I'm relatively young. I'm a young fella. I was born back in '94, so yeah.
Oh man, I thought you. Wait, I thought you were my age.
Oh no, no, no.
No, oh man,
I'm a
I thought you were
babe.
my
I
age.
am but a
Oh
I
shit.
am but a humble babe.
Oh jeez. Yeah, I thought you were my age. Well, no, no. Okay. So now I see why you don't know what I'm talking about. Uh, with Grandpa and all that. Yeah, that was only around in the late '80s, early '90s. But
Mm.
no, like flipping through the TV guide, I remember, and it was I think it was like 93, 94. My area was finally getting the Sci-Fi Channel.
Mm.
And I was
Mhm.
really excited because back then, when Sci-Fi Channel first came out, that's all they would show was like classic monster movies. They didn't have any original programming yet, so they
Mm.
just would show like a bunch of Godzilla movies on the weekend. They'd have the Hammer horror classics during the week. Then late at night, they would have the like a bit more of the scarier movies, like they would get some of the actual horror movies, like Jason and Freddy and stuff like that late at night. When kids were asleep, but obviously still censored for TV. But they were allowed to show those at those later hours. And that was great. Like I was really excited. And then also TNT. I don't know if you remember this. TNT had something called Monster Vision, and
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Monster Vision was like usually weekends where they'd have marathons of different monster movies of the same type. Like they'd have a Universal, they have one on Gamera, they have one on um, Godzilla and whatnot. Then you had Mystery Science Theater 3000, and you
Yeah.
gotta love them for doing that. They played all the old Gamera movies. They played some of the one or two of the Godzilla movies. They didn't have very many rights for the Godzilla movies, but the ones they did do, which was I think Godzilla vs. Sea Monster and Godzilla vs. Megalon. Those are the two famous ones, but they couldn't. Again, when it comes to rights, Toho's very protective of the Godzilla franchise. If anybody's wondering,
Mhm.
so much so that for a long time Western audiences couldn't even get their hands on a lot of Godzilla stuff because it was only for Japan. It wasn't actually until after Godzilla '98 that they started to let go a bit and like actually allow a lot of merchandise to reach the West. And the only way you could get a lot of these Godzilla figures and these Godzilla collectibles was actually going to Japan. That was the only way you could do it. And um, and now with Legendary's Godzilla being as popular as it is, yeah, it's not selling that many, didn't sell that many tickets. Godzilla King of the Monsters didn't sell very many tickets. It didn't do very well at the box office, but on video sales, on home video sales, it actually flew off the shelves. So it clearly is still, it's the audience it's popular with, not so much for the critics, but hey, I'm not going to really delve into that because I have my own real opinions about that. And I'll just say this: it's a monster movie, guys. It's done in the classic Godzilla style. Of course, not everyone's going to get it because it's done in the classic Godzilla style. It literally, if you took Godzilla King of Monsters, is literally if you took a Godzilla movie from the '60s and made it in this time frame, that's what you get.
Oh, totally.
Mike Daughtry did a fine job at making a Godzilla movie, not an American movie. That's how I see it.
I was watching King Kong versus Godzilla last night, and there's a very funny character, and he's a businessman, and the dubbing is wonderfly funny, and they call him a dumbbell in the movie. He's like, dumbbell, and it's like, part of the fun is being able to, watch a movie and have a laugh every now and then,
exactly.
Just, bask in some of the great stuff, and watching King of the Monsters, I got to see it twice in theaters. There was a lot of great stuff, and it really got me invested in what could be coming down the line with Godzilla versus Kong,
Well, that's like Mike Daughtry, the director. He said he wanted to try to do a Godzilla series where it was back in ancient times, like to give more background into the ancient civilizations that worship these as gods. I think that would be pretty cool. He was kind of suggesting almost like a Game of Thrones kind of thing where each tribe, each civilization had their own avatar, like whether it be Godzilla or Rodan and stuff like that. And these guys would just be going to war with each other all the time.
And the other day I was thinking about it, and I was thinking how interesting it is that there's so many different ancient civilizations, primitive civilizations, even with the the older Godzilla movies. Like in Godzilla versus Kong, you have Pharaoh Island, and the people worship King Kong. Then you have Infant Island. Then you have, and then the original 1954 Godzilla, the people, they believed Godzilla was, an ancient mythical beast. So they would, worship and dance for him, It's really
and then you have like you just watched Atragon. You have Man in the Moon Empire. And you have Godzilla versus Megalon, where you had the
Seatopia. The Seatopia, yes. And it's really great to be able to see just you can really see how much fun Doherty had with Godzilla.
Oh yeah. I mean, dude, the man was a Godzilla fan. You can tell. He truly was a Godzilla fan. He does. With so many, look what happened. I mean, okay, but let's take a step back. Look what we're on Twitter a lot. We know many of the people in the fandom menace. I mean, look what happens when you take a franchise and you go and do it your own way. You don't respect any of the lore. You don't respect any things that came before it. And look what happened. I mean, it is just a mess with Star Wars fans, and now they're changing the lore even more and that kind of thing. And it's like, it's just devastating. And then you had Mike Doherty or Daughtry, or however you say his last name.
Yeah.
And he goes and he makes a Godzilla movie that feels like a Godzilla movie. I mean, it's just it's just like, thank God, almost like and that same thing with look at Sonic the Hedgehog. Look what happened with that.
Oh yes,
they showed what Sonic was originally going to be, and people were flipping out. But amazingly, they said, "Okay, we'll change it," and it made money. It made a lot of money because they did that, and it looks like the classic Sonic. Again,
and then you have the Snyder cut. Recent news.
Snyder cut. Yeah,
That'd be great. You know, I'll definitely watch it. You know, I haven't personally watched Justice League since I saw it when it came out, and
yeah,
I'd definitely watch it again. You know, with the Snyder cut. You know.
yeah. I'm interested to see how much is different and
Yeah. Yeah.
um what all cuts were different, or what all how the pacing is. You know, I'm just interested in seeing it. I wasn't really a big fan of Justice League.
Same.
I still say Zack Snyder's my favorite movie from Zack Snyder will always be 300.
Oh yes.
That is my absolute favorite from him. It was that movie was excellent. Like the cinematography, the special effects. That movie was excellent. I mean, and that movie did really well too. I think that's what really put him on the map. And you know, he just took a story from Frank Miller and made it into a movie, and it was just great. I mean, I love that. That will still always be my favorite from him, from Zack Snyder. But you know, it's kind of funny because you know, I remember when it first came out, and you know, people were saying like, man, why does it feel like, you know, that movie's so over the top? You know, it's based on a real story, and why does it feel so over the top? And I'm like, well, think about it this way: to the Greeks, the Persians were monsters. I mean, no, seriously, like the animals that they brought with them, to the Greeks, they were like monsters. So, I mean, that exaggeration is more, it's telling the story from the Greek perspective. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You know, but what going through, you know, that kind of thing, it's kind of interesting because I love learning about history too. So like, you know, it's just fun because, you know, there's actually some science behind the Godzilla movies. Do you know why Godzilla's fire is blue?
Oh, why is that?
Okay, so there's a event in nuclear fission called Chekhovian light. So what happens is when radiation is that strong, it gives a blue aurora that's visible to the naked eye. So literally he has such concentrated radiation that you can actually see the radiation coming from his mouth, like, because it's like in a flame type form. That's why it's blue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's an actual event called Chekhovian light. Look, if you look it up, that's a real thing. So that's why his fire's blue, because it's more intense.
Man, that's great. I love that. I love it.
Yeah, so that's the funny thing about the Godzilla movies. Yeah, it's completely illogical, but they do speckle some real science into these movies. That you need to that's fun to look up. You know, like I like in Shin Godzilla, like when they're trying to figure out what to do when he first arrives, and they're like, oh, if he comes to shore, he'll just beach himself and then he'll probably die, because that's the logical thing that would happen with an animal that size. And then, you know, as you know, like, yeah, it doesn't turn out that way. But yeah.
Oh, I love and obviously I'm talking a lot about King Kong versus Godzilla because I just watched that movie.
Yeah.
But I love and I'm probably gonna make a short video on it, but you come to Faroe Island, you get your main characters going there, a primitive society, and then the main characters, they're seeing them you know, pray and worship after they hear what they think is lightning and thunder. And they're like, oh, look at this. Every time the lightning goes off, these people, these primitives, they start worshiping it like a god. And they're laughing a bit. And then all of a sudden they hear King Kong's roar in the distance. And they're like, that's not lightning. That's not thunder. That's something else. That's great. Just
actually, you know my favorite part about that movie?
What?
Where they give the kids cigarettes.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I'm thinking, you know, when I was a kid watching that, I didn't really think that much of it. And now, as an adult, I'm like, oh my god, that's terror. That would give if you did that in today's society movie, that movie would be rated R right then and there. That movie would be rated R.
Oh, so funny. Just like, oh, we didn't bring him candy, and they see the kid.
Like,
pursing his lips for a cigarette. Oh man.
Yeah, because then he says to the kid, "Oh, you better not smoke these at home." It's like, that's just terrible. Like as an adult, when you think about that, it's like, oh my god, that's terrible. What? But yeah, as a kid, you're like, oh, what's the big deal? Oh, and then you're an adult, it's like, oh yeah, that's bad. But well, it shows also kind of like what at the time what Japanese thought about smoking. It's like, yeah, no big deal, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, no big deal, whatever. But if you did you watch Kong Skull Island?
Oh yes, I did. I did watch that.
Yeah. When he's fighting the they call it the devilfish, but it's that squid. That's an homage to when King Kong fought the octopus in King Kong versus Godzilla.
Yes. Oh man, I love that. I love that scene, honestly. In King Kong vs. Godzilla, you see just the big octopus, and then just you have the villagers. They're throwing like spears at it. You can see like the shadows of the spears on the screen. Yeah. But then you see this stop motion tentacle grab a villager and just start throwing him around. Oh. I loved that, and it's just great. I just love that.
Yeah, it was well done. And that was one of the first Godzilla movies that was more of a comedy, and they knew it was a comedy. They intentionally, even the Japanese version, if you ever get to watch the Japanese version, is just as comedic. And it was more meant to be a bit more lighthearted. And then you get the very next one, which is Mothra versus Godzilla, or Godzilla versus the Thing. And that one was played pretty straight. I mean, that was pretty straightforward. And it has some great moments in that about, the brotherhood of man and, the fact that you have to work together and that kind of thing. It's a very good movie. And Shiro Honda really always, tried to put in, that kind of message at the end of a lot of his sci-fi movies about, like, we have to, stop fighting ourselves because there's bigger, more pressing things that, we need to take care of. And, it's kind of funny because Shiro Honda, as you know, many of the Japanese staff were in World War II. The Shiro Honda was actually drafted 3 separate times into the Japanese army, and he was actually captured in China as a prisoner of war. And then after the war ended, he was released, and then he went back and visited Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it had a profound impact on how he made movies from then on, because you have to understand, Ishiro Honda, back when he was first being groomed as a director, he was originally going to be groomed to direct documentaries and dramas for women. Actually, that was originally what he was. That's originally what he was being groomed for. That's why, if you really look at the original Gojira, the movie has almost a documentary feel to it. It's almost like, and it's following a reporter. And one of the things that Ishiro Honda did, which was very unconventional in Japan at the time, was he gave very prominent roles to women. They weren't just, serving tea all the time to the main male actors. They actually had some bearing to the story. And that's, again, because of his training making dramas for women. So it was kind of funny because, you have a lot of this talk in Hollywood, and it's like about, female superheroes, that kind of thing. Well, in the Godzilla movies back in the 60s, a bit more subtle, but they were still very strong female leads. They were just more subtle about it. And it worked to great effect. Look at the original Gojira. Emiko is bearing the secret about Dr. Serizawa, and she has to break her promise to Serizawa not to tell anybody, but it was the only thing to save the world. And mind you, that's also her fiance too, but yet she's essentially sleeping with Ogata. And I mean, it's not actually shown, but it's implied that, like, she does not have any actual feelings for Serizawa other than feeling that he's more like a brother to her. So
Mhm.
it's a very interesting dynamic, and I can only imagine what a person in Japan was thinking, because back in the day, because as it's stated, it was an arranged marriage while they were children. So you're
Mhm.
going against tradition here, and yet again, it's showing that forget your grudges and stuff like that. We have bigger things to worry about. Again, that was classic Honda there.
And on that topic of just females in the franchise, Godzilla
Yeah,
franchise, a movie that I enjoyed showing to my mother. My mom, she watches them occasionally. She's
yeah,
not the biggest. Again, it was mostly more of me and my uncle,
right,
but
right.
I really enjoyed showing her Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. That's
Yes,
from 2002. Great
yeah.
movie.
Oh
You
yeah.
have a wonderful female lead,
Hmm.
and you have a great, great story of personal
Yes.
growth, overcoming challenges, and
Hmm.
being able to survive, great trauma, physical and emotional trauma, and with perseverance. Just a great
Oh
message,
yeah.
great movie there.
Yeah, it very much is so. Another thing that movie had too was it really talked about kind of like depression and like how
Yes.
you can overcome
Mhm.
depression, because the female lead connects with the scientist's daughter, saying that she carries around that plant that when you touch it, it folds up,
Mm,
and she even says to her, I have one too, just don't keep it forever, because it's almost like you can't hold on to the past forever.
mm,
Yeah,
mm,
and it's like that movie is just that movie is like almost heartbreaking at times when you really look at it, and it's really interesting that you have like movies that give I think people forget it's like you know having a strong female lead, whether it be in a giant monster movie or a science fiction movie, they don't always have to carry a rifle or a bazooka or anything like that. Sometimes
mhm,
it's actually the moral decisions they make that are impactful to the story, that are just as powerful, if not more powerful. You have to understand, like, I'm going back to the older Godzilla movies with the Shiro Honda. You didn't have like Princess Leia's, you didn't have Ellen
mhm,
Ripley's yet. That wasn't even a thought in anybody's mind. Actually, if you even watch the American movies from the 1950s, I mean, yeah, a lot of the times there was the pretty female scientist, but she was still served coffee to the guy. I mean, they didn't have any
mhm.
real intricate part in the story if you really look at it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny. But yet, you have like movies that really are very impactful. And another really good female lead was from Terror of Mechagodzilla, who played Katsura.
Mm.
And that one was another heartbreaking one. I don't know. I think Shiro Honda like doing the whole heartbreaking kind of
Yeah.
moments on,
Yeah.
on screen. Yeah, he seemed to like do that a lot. But it's she's in control of Mechagodzilla. She's also part cyborg, and it's just one of those movies where it's like what's going to happen in the end, but you still don't see it coming, kind of thing.
Mhm. And that's part of the wonderful thing about movies. Initially, if you look surface level, if you take a surface level look
Hmm.
at a lot of these movies, you only get so much out of them. But
Right.
of course, as you watch them, as you rewatch, and as you kind of ponder and think
Yeah.
about
Analyze. Yeah.
the morality, the moral questions,
Yeah.
and just all the things like how would I feel, those kind of questions, like
Hmm.
you can
Yeah.
really
Exactly.
gain a lot from these.
Yeah. Well, that's like I think like when it came to Godzilla King of the Monsters, the 2019 one, Mike Daughtry did a very poetic kind of thing. In the original Godzilla, Serizawa sacrifices himself to kill Godzilla and
Hmm.
save the world. In this one, he sacrifices himself to save Godzilla so Godzilla can save the world. It's kind of It was very poetic, actually, and it was a very nice touch. It's almost like, and yet at the same time, even from watching the trailers, I'm like, dude, he's gonna die. I know it. It's like his name's Sarazawa. I know if Mike Daughtry's as big of a Godzilla fan as I am, we know where this is going. And it's like, yep. But he put in a lot of big Easter eggs in that movie too for the major Godzilla fans, for that movie. And real, I don't know what the future holds for the American Godzilla movies right now, but it would be nice if they could continue them, after Kong, because Mike Daughtry kind of set up like this entire world. Like he pretty much, Godzilla 2014 introduced everyone back to Godzilla. Kong Skull Island introduced us to Kong, but it was really Godzilla King of the Monsters that did the world building. It's like, here's what's happening. And also, I love the fact that they still kept Ghidorah an alien. Like,
yes,
because that opens up so much more. It's like, what else is out there? You have Space Godzilla, you have Gigan, you have all the aliens that from the Godzilla series. I mean, heck, if you want to, you can go all out. Back, full. I always go full toe on everyone.
Yes,
and just go for it.
There's a lot of wonderful things, even just in Kong Skull Island, they introduced the concept, at least in that universe, of the hollow Earth theory, and then they kind of bring it back and they re-emphasize its importance in King of the Monsters. Explaining like, oh, how could Godzilla get from somewhere in the Pacific all the way up to someplace up in Antarctica or wherever. Oh, well, hollow Earth channels, all these different things, and it really opens up a lot.
Part. I loved how they did that, because that was always the argument for even the Toho Godzilla. Was like, how does he show up, something this big show up all of a sudden in Tokyo, and nobody saw him coming on radar or sonar? It's like, Earth. He uses it as like a highway, essentially. It's like, going to different parts of the world. And I
hello. We got Jeff. Jeff W, the rookie critic. He's popping in. Hello.
Hey, nice to meet you. But yep, we're talking about Godzilla and science fiction here. So, just trust me, we probably could talk for 2 whole days on just the Godzilla series. Just because if you try to analyze each movie, it would probably take a couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, let's as we're kind of getting pretty good. It was a great discussion here.
Yep.
Do you have anything that you'd like to mention on here that you'd like people to check out?
If you guys want to, like Mongo was saying, check out the Godzilla wiki, the actual wiki of the Wikizilla. Is that what's still called, or is it still Wikizilla?
I think so. Pretty sure.
Okay. Yeah, check that out. That gives you some great information. It's run by Godzilla fans. So they are giving you as best information as they can. Also, Mike Daughtry, I follow him. He has some really fun tweets that he does, especially around Halloween, because of that movie Trick or Treat he did. That's like one of his favorite holidays. So if you want to follow him, go ahead. I wanted to give a shout out to Mongo here for having me on your channel. I really appreciate it, especially with my computer being down. I can't really host streams. I have to join them because I'm using my phone. Now, Orange Hat did say that I can set my phone to desktop and it will still work, but I tried that and it didn't seem to work. So
man, I tell you, thankfully it's not too complex to do it on here, but I was like, okay, I do this, I do that. Make sure there's a little thumbnail. And
SteamYard is probably the best user-friendly one that I've seen that people have used, because it's user-friendly and like it's pretty straightforward how to use it. But the only thing I really want to say is thank you, Mongo, for having me on your channel, and I hope we can do this again. Maybe talk about a couple different subjects.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Folks, again, this is great. It's been a great little stream here. I've been, I wasn't really worried about this, but I was definitely anxious.
Oh,
Again, wonderful guest here, TJ. Check him out on Twitter. You can find him. It's pretty
it's
easy.
yeah, Kaiju4284 is my Twitter.
He's a great guy. Let's see. Again, Godzilla is great. Godzilla is good. There's a lot to enjoy.
Yep.
If you're interested, check out check out some of the other videos on this channel. Try and look me up on Twitter. It's pretty easy. It's just Mongo's Big Thinks on Twitter. And yeah, thanks for coming by, guys. Thanks again, TJ.
All right. Thank you.
And I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.